Welcome to the Practice You podcast. My name is Elena Brower. Let's dive into today's conversation regarding life's myriad transitions and how we refine our responses in our relationships, our wellness, our households, our work, and in our practices. You are invited to learn and love and listen with me. Welcome to Practice You. Welcome back to the podcast. I have a relatively new friend who instantly felt like an old friend with me today. Her name is Melissa Berry Appleton. She's a Buddhist chaplain, ordained in the Soto Zen Prajna mountain order by Roshi, Joan, Halifax of Upaya Zen Center. Currently, she's a chaplain with the University of British Columbia, Okanagan, British Columbia Interior Health Physicians, and the Clinical Counselling and Social Work Graduate Intern Practicum program. She's worked as a frontline worker in geriatric cognitive impairments, palliative care, and residential treatment centers for addiction. She is just about complete her Master's of Clinical Counseling Psychology. Melissa's practiced and taught yoga, somatics, meditation for more than 20 years. More importantly, Melissa is the mom of 3 incredible humans, now launching as young adults. It is, however, Melissa, not just the burgeoning friendship that we are building, but your deep commitment to practice in the, as you call it on your Substack, the domestic monastery, that actually really touched me when we first started becoming closer. And I'm really, really happy to welcome you to the podcast.
Thank you so much for inviting me here. It's just great to be here.
Yes. And I think what I would like to talk about first, for perhaps the parents listening who might have an adolescent around, what are some of the, maybe 1 or 2 of the real best practices that you have for raising children within the context of your own practice?
The practice that I have engaged in the most, Elena, is in transitions. I imagine you can remember the transition of moving your child from the car into the house and all the bubbling up that can happen there. And so I started this practice of when we would get inside the house, we would go directly to the living room, put everything down and get down on the ground and just lay on the floor and spend about 10 to 15 minutes there.
Wow.
It was my own practice to get down and lay on the ground. Sometimes the kids would join me, sometimes they would do their own thing, but it was just kind of this moment where mom is on the ground and she can't get up. And it was an opportunity for me to settle and ground myself in the transition and be ready for the next thing.
First of all, for our listener, we didn't plan this call. I didn't give her my questions. I barely have them planned myself. She's just a friend and I wanted to ask her a few things. But that's probably one of the most insightful practices for a parent or a human that I can think of. That when you've been out of the house to go and lie down for 15 minutes on your floor, drop all your stuff before you do anything else. I thank you for that. Wow. Addiction recovery, let's talk about that. You are working or have worked in that sphere, and I'm interested to hear about your experience there, and if you care to share it, what your personal experience trajectory has been regarding addiction.
Yeah. This is one of the greatest treasures of my life. I have a good handful of treasures. I chose to stop drinking at the age of 25. I would say that I definitely had a challenge with addiction. And I had what I would describe as a spiritual experience where stopping just happened. Of course, I had an enormous amount of support. I was a member of 12-step meetings for many, many years. And then I ended up working in women's residential treatment for about 7 years, very intensely. And actually, Elena, I burnt out. There was one monumental moment where I felt it so clearly, and I took a leave of absence. I also had 3 really young children, so it was a good time to take a leave of absence. But I actually never went back to more institutional kinds of work. And as I think you know, the work actually has never ended because I'm in the community of recovery. So, not a week passes today that I don't get a call from at least one parent who has a teenager or a young adult who is really struggling, and the parent is just beside themselves and wondering what to do. So, I am still really alive in the work, just in a different way today.
It's interesting. My son has friends, and I love them all. There are about 5, 6 of them that are really dear to our family. And there are a couple that I can see I have fears about. And I wonder if it's possible for you to share perhaps how to talk to a kid who's struggling with addiction, who's a teenager. And I know there's no sort of pat, rote answer because every kid is different, but maybe you have some wisdom on this.
Yeah, I definitely want to be clear that I don't have the answer, and it is so unique to each person. I mean, my experience as a mom is that I was very open about my recovery with all 3 of my children. We were able to have very open dialogue about substances, about use, in a really non-judgmental way and in a more curious kind of way. So actually, like very naturally, it was easy to talk about. I think that's what I encourage in parents, to talk about it openly without judgment. We're not taught how to do this. We don't get any training on this. And actually, fear becomes the most predominant thing for a parent. And without giving up anybody's confidentiality, I have had to work with the grips of fear around addiction and my kids very intimately.
Yeah, same.
I think in all the years that I worked with women who were in treatment for recovery, Elena, I cannot tell you what worked. It almost seemed to be that there is this miracle kind of moment where all the right causes and conditions slide into place, and there's a crack or a window or an opening for a tender, intimate moment for a change to occur, a shift to occur. And it is a very, very intimate thing. So that's a tough thing with teenagers, to have all the right causes and conditions for an intimate moment.
Yeah. There are 2 things that you said, and one, the note about intimacy, I think is really important. And I think one thing we can do is just create more occurrences of crossover with our kids where it's 3:00 and I know that he's going to come home, or whatever the timing is for your child if you're a parent. Creating an hour or 2-hour window, if you can, when you're actually just sort of milling about, not too busy, and totally able to drop in with the kid. A couple of occasions I did that, and very serious miracles by way of conversation occurred that were turning points in my son's life and my own as well. So I think you're right about that. I think there isn't one answer, and there are many ways to just create more intimacy with the kid. And lastly, I would say, to your point, no judgments about your own trajectory as a parent, I think is what I'm hearing. And for our listener, maybe you are still drinking yourself or still using yourself, and you're worried about your kid. Just be open about it and say, hey, I'm kind of freaking out about this also.
Yeah.
That could be really helpful.
Elena, I usually tell parents to go to 5 Al-Anon meetings. It's not that I think that Al-Anon is the answer. I usually say, go to Al-Anon. You have to go 5 times, not 4, not 3, not 2. Go to 5 meetings. Find one thing that resonates with you at each meeting. There for sure will be things that you don't like, but find one thing. And the idea is that they kind of turn their attention away from hyper-focusing on their kid and what needs to be fixed and what needs to be changed. And the direction is centered more on them and their own learning, their own digesting and processing.
Right. That's really good. Such a big topic. We could go on like this for about an hour. To provide us with an interlude, I chose a card from Roshi Joan's deck. The deck is called In a Moment, in a Breath. And I picked one. I thought of you. I put you in my mind, your beautiful face, your kind eyes. And I picked on unselfishness. And I think it's the actual epitome of you. Recall that all beings and things are interconnected, including friend and enemy, forest and city, you and the air you breathe. On your next breath, consider the futility of self-centeredness. Feel this in your body. Next, bring someone to mind and heart whom you wish to be free of suffering. Let your wish for this person help strengthen your aspiration to serve others. As you experience fully how this feels in your body, breathe deeply into your belly. Vow to do whatever you can to end suffering for all beings. It's one of the fire cards, meeting the boundless heart. It's so beautiful.
It's a beautiful deck of cards.
I'm so happy it's here. I feel like I have a little piece of Roshi in my pocket.
Yeah. Yeah.
I implored you to send me a couple of thoughts about what's sort of lighting you up these days, and you wrote the following. This morning I'm contemplating how transitions in the Zendo during traditional Buddhist practice might offer some wisdom for the many transitions of life. In many transitions of life I find myself in at this moment in time. Sometimes the Zendo transitions are like a perfect symphony. Other times, people are tripping, dropping things, the temperature's off, chant too slow, time schedule off. The bumps can so easily become dissatisfactory, irritating, and we miss the beautiful opportunity for deep compassion in our bodies, in our relationships, in our everyday life. You went on to say that you're thankful this is not a solo practice, most deeply realized in community and in connection. So interesting because even in the life of a domestic monastery, as it were, my house, your house, anyone's house, listening, you might have a pet or a partner or a kid or a friend blow through and, something goes wrong and you could spend a half an hour in a whole slew of judgments and, commentary, internal commentary, or it becomes this beautiful opportunity for compassion for the other person. Like, wow, yeah, that must be hard if that's the behavior that they're sort of emitting at this moment. And I wonder if there's anything that you can offer, Melissa, by way of how to live in the domestic monastery of one's home and sort of keep the Zendo close.
Mm-hmm. I mean, this ties into the reading that you just gave. It's so easy for me to think about when I sit down on my meditation cushion that somehow it's my practice. It's me, Melissa, sitting down on my cushion doing the meditation, and that it's this wellness practice that's to benefit my life, make things better. But actually, it's not that much about me. It's a kind of a priming for every relationship that's going to happen after that moment, every interaction that I'm going to have. And when I'm moving through life, especially in my home, and things are really, really bumpy, the sweet thing about that practice of stopping and sitting down on my cushion, it comes alive in my home where I stop for a minute. I catch myself, I pause. I'm less likely to react. And there's these little spaces that kind of slow down deliberation where I get to reconsider how I'm going to adapt to this, how I'm going to respond, how I'm going to engage. I like things a certain way in my home. I'm not very good at messiness, when things are not clean. That's my biggest challenge, and I've got young adults coming and going, family members, dogs, friends. Sometimes I have 25 meditators in my studio coming and going. There's a lot of transition. And it's the stopping that helps me, the catching myself that really, really helps.
You talk a little bit in the exchange that we had about you've just turned 50, so we're in the same club now in the 50s. Although I do feel like somehow I think it's because you've had many more years of practice, you feel older, wiser to me. Not that you look it, but you feel it. I'm just saying. You talked about polishing the altar of your marriage, your treasured marriage. And I really flagged that as something that I would like to just briefly address as something that our listener and myself, I can really take with me from this conversation.
Yeah. Oh, first of all, it's amazing. Honestly, Elena, I feel like I'm just starting to grow up right now. I feel like a late bloomer and that I'm just starting to grow up, and it's just kind of so exciting, actually. What I can say about marriage is, first of all, I had just this wonderful midlife crisis right before 40 where I was like, oh God, I'm out of here. I am out of here. Like I kind of didn't want to do the whole marriage thing and the parenting thing and the householding thing. And it was a really big struggle. And the consistency of my practice really asked me to stay and watch what shifts and changes, to not be so interested in trying to get somewhere or shift it or change it or fix it, but just stay and watch what happens. And interestingly, after about 3 years, out of nowhere, I just fell actually kind of madly in love with my husband again. And he didn't really do anything. I'd also like to say my husband made some choices about 2 years ago to do some deep personal work and actually didn't tell me about it until he was months and months into it. And it's just been extraordinary and such an incredible gift to so many people in so many ways. And I had no idea it was coming. And it had nothing to do with me. There's this saying in Alcoholics Anonymous that we live by attraction and not by promotion. That practice, I've kept it really close to my heart for all these 26 years.
The part about him doing his work without letting you know and you doing your work and finding a new sort of closeness, so beautiful.
Elena, we're not alike either. Sometimes I've had these bizarre thoughts that have gone through my mind, like, oh, I need to find somebody more like me, or we're so different. But actually, the difference, it's the best thing. He's like a math geek. He's so happy with 6 screens in front of him and numbers flying everywhere, His meditation is being on a mountain bike for 6 hours. We're so different, and it's so awesome.
Right. It does keep it fresh, the fact that you're not the same and that you have different interests, although I did make a mental note about the fact that you are looking forward to connecting with your wild mountain hiking bitches, which instantly made me pick up my phone and text my 2 girlfriends here and say, let's go for a walk.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Yeah, thank you for that. So you're not so different, you and your husband. However, let's say we have a listener who she's just kind of had it, and her husband is not really doing the work that your husband and mine are doing on themselves. Really, he isn't interested, our listener's man. And I wonder if you have any intel for what that might be like and how to sort of dive into one's own practice to really assess whether it is the end or maybe just a new beginning.
First of all, I don't actually know the answer, but the thing that's coming up for me is, what is it that opens your heart? What is it that opens your heart radically in a way that allows you to hold your own heart so that you can really hold the heart of your partner and wherever they are. And the thought of trying to change them or wanting them to be something different or somebody else starts to dissolve. You don't have to push it away or push it down. It just starts to soften and dissolve.
I've had that exact experience here. Thank you for that. I knew you would have something. Thank you so much. So beautiful. And then I pulled from Charlotte Joko Beck's book, Ordinary Wonder, which is relatively new, not super new, but about a year, I think, old. And I went sort of oracle style, opened the book to page 141. And I think this is a wonderful leaping off point for a few minutes of banter between the two of us. The gateless gate. When we practice, we develop a basic vision, which gets stronger over time, as to who we are and what we're really doing in our life. When I say, quote unquote, a vision, I don't mean something mystical. I mean acknowledging who you are and what you want to do next. I found that most human beings, particularly Western-raised human beings, feel fundamentally they're worthless, really worthless. Unless we've been practicing for a long time or are extraordinarily lucky in how we were brought up in the world, most of us feel this. We have our own little quirks that give our sense of worthlessness a personal flavor and style. But that's what it is. We don't want to feel worthless. We don't even want to hear or know about it. It's very painful to feel that you're worthless or unlovable, and that feeling creates a running tension that we may be unaware of until we sit, and then it all comes out. Yeah, I found that. I opened it this morning, and I was like, oh, no, I'm going to pick another one. That's no fun. And then I was like, you know what? We picked it. Let's go. Let's get friendly with suffering.
This is good.
Yeah, I think it's seminal. It's foundational, fundamental to the way that most of us were actually raised or feel about ourselves. What say you, Melissa Berry Appleton?
Oh, I think it's interesting you picked that because I sent you an email where I had this questioning about myself, like, Elena, why are you wanting to talk to me?
Right.
I'm tucked here into the mountains in British Columbia so quietly, just happy to serve my community and to work here. I don't have a big Instagram following. My website is out of date. I only lead one retreat a year, and I'm not really trying to become anybody. Why do you want to do this? Is that I am a householder. I spent solid time raising 3 kids. I only worked part-time because honestly, I realized that I was only capable of so much. And actually, I'm capable of far less than what I think I am, and I'm okay with that. And here I am now, Elena, at 50. I so wished that someone had said to me when I was younger, don't worry, you have time. You could have a whole career from 50 to 70 if you want. And I could have relaxed a little bit more. I could have sat down in my self-worth and my work as a mother a little bit more and trusted and known that the sky's wide open for me so long as I should live long. And here I am about to step over the threshold into another chapter. 50 to 70, here I come. I don't know what it's going to be, but I'm super excited about it.
Wow. That's kind of how I'm feeling also. Like, wow, let's do this. Let's do this. I would now love to turn our attention to chaplaincy, more specifically to palliative care, because I'm entering into that now. Personally, I've taken a pretty extensive hospice training now, and I would love to hear perhaps if you have any kind of thoughts or stories, maybe one or two, on your experience and what it means or meant to you.
Yeah. Elena, so my work in palliative care was a really long time ago. Actually, I was in my late 20s. And the truth is, I don't think I'd been on this earth long enough to really appreciate where I was located and the work that I was doing at that time. And actually, my work was I was a classical flautist. And I moved from room to room in palliative care with a harpist, and we would play music. And then we would sit in silence and just wait for whatever interaction arose, if anything at all. I am really interested in medical assisted death. I'm not engaged in that work right now. I'm going to return down to Upaya to take the Being with Dying program in the spring and really open myself up to returning to that work now that I've grown up a little bit. And I'm not a stranger to death because I've worked so deeply in mental health and mental wellness in my community. And most of the death that I've had to confront is the inconceivable and spontaneous death that's caused by addiction. So I feel like a young student in this area still. And so I'm excited to kind of be the student with you.
Gosh, I really look forward to getting many more hours under my belt and having some conversations with you about this experience. So far, it's relegated to James's mom, who is not yet in formal hospice, but it feels like we're sort of at the timeline of that, and she's in a great deal of pain. She's at about an 8 now every day. I'm so grateful that I had this training when I did, because now it doesn't move me. It doesn't shake me. I can just be present with her and tend, give her what she needs. If she needs management of the pain, then sort of vote for that. It's just such a beautiful opportunity to be supportive to people in such a fragile moment.
Incredible. It's also such a beautiful way to deeply appreciate and celebrate life.
That too, yes. Yes. In fact, I wonder if you have any thoughts on this. She is close. It does seem like she's losing steam quickly. We've planned to have a celebration of her life over Zoom with her family that she can't see in the coming weeks. Have you ever done such a thing?
Say this again.
We're having a celebration of her life over Zoom before she dies. I proposed the idea many months ago when she got a pretty dire diagnosis, and I said, why don't you attend your own funeral? And why don't we call it a celebration? And why don't you enjoy hearing what people are saying of you? And she thought about it for a while, and she liked the idea.
Yeah, I think about legacy, when we get really close to leaving this earth. I imagine myself wanting to know, gosh, what was my legacy here? What part of my heart is going to live on in the people that I leave behind? And that I want to know, in the words and the voices of the people that I love so dearly, what part of me is so close in your heart? What did you learn from me? And then there might be some last residual pieces of wisdom that I need to say before I go. I couldn't even tell you what they are now, but I wonder for James's mom, what's arising in the last days? What moments of incredible clarity and insight come up at that time?
What a wonderful way to close this process. At the end of it, I think that's what I'll do, is really make some quiet time for all of us to sit for a few minutes together silently, and then have her offer some words, some clear insight.
Beautiful.
Beautiful. Yeah. Wonderful. Is there anything else that you would like to address here and now?
I always like to recognize my teachers whenever I speak publicly, that I have deep, deep appreciation and gratitude for all the wisdom that has been passed down and offered to me, for the dedication of time and resource. And as a part of that, I like to encourage people to check out Upaya Zen Center, to participate in their programming, and to really give generously to the work that they do, that I believe is making a profound difference in the way people relate to each other and the way that they engage with the world. I can also say I lead just one retreat a year. It's really precious. I get to collaborate with one other facilitator. It usually changes each year. I usually have like one or two handfuls of people I work with. Collaboration is one of my greatest passions because it's so creative, so generative, and I learn an enormous amount. And I get to do this at Stowe Lake Farm, at an incredible farm on Salt Spring Island in British Columbia. It usually fills up pretty fast, but if anybody's interested, it is a kind of retreat that is much gentler than the kind of intensified monastic forms of meditation retreat. It has a trauma-informed lens, it has movement practices, and a little bit of opportunity to work on the farm.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And then, I'm always curious, who's out there? What are you doing? I love connecting with people. And please, if you're listening, don't be a stranger. Reach out. If you're keen on ideas for collaboration or sharing resources, I love hearing about it.
Thank you so much for that. You have been in practice for 25 years. You've been teaching for 17. And you mentioned at the end of one of our exchanges that Zen teacher Bernie Glassman's 3 tenets have been a guiding principle for you. Bernie Glassman Roshi was also one of Roshi Joan's teachers. So we're honoring him here by speaking about him. We're so grateful. Not knowing, bearing witness, compassionate response, or taking action, as is known in certain circles, are better guides today, you wrote, than any congealed certainty I may have had about what yoga is or is not. You reference your yoga practice and teaching of yoga classes, not just meditation. You say it's been good for you to step down and not be seen. Your role as a teacher is to see your students. This is my training ground. And I want to thank you for that, because you put words to a feeling I've had for some time. And even though I'm still working on Glow and I still do a couple of retreats a year, I'm so not called anymore to be in the center or take the spotlight. You know what I mean? Like used to happen. I'm really happy now to just focus on where I'm going and whom I'm in front of and how can I serve them. And I really appreciated how you wrote this and the fact that you embody this. So thank you for that.
I can feel this in you, Elena. I feel seen by you. When I listen to your podcasts, I can hear it in your guests that they also feel held and seen by you. And it's just beautiful. So thank you.
You're welcome. And lastly, and quite practically, I would like to give our listener a chance to connect with you in the interwebs, which is probably the best way to find you first and all of your offerings that you've previously mentioned. Is there a website? I know there's a Substack. I'd love for you to just list those opportunities for our listener, if you wouldn't mind.
Okay. Well, everything is through my name, Melissa Berry Appleton. It really is like the fruit. There's a berry and there's an apple. That is where my website is. It's where Instagram is. And Substack is The Domestic Monastery by Melissa Berry Appleton. I'm writing every morning, and in the next couple of weeks, you'll start to see things drop on there. I'm not sure what else it will become, except a great place to connect with writers and great thinkers and feelers.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your heart, your teaching, your patience, your mind, your practice, most importantly. And my hands are folded in front of me. I'm bowing to you, dear friend.
Gentle bow right back, Elena.
Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you.